Hey everyone! In this video, we'll be linking OpenAI's powerful ChatGPT with a database, more specifically a MySQL database, allowing us to seamlessly retrieve and store information without writing any queries. The database will be running on our local system and we'll simply prompt it like we prompt ChatGPT and it is going to retrieve information for us. So grab your favorite coding snacks, fire up your IDE and let's dive into the world of intelligent chat applications powered by ChatGPT and MySQL database. Let's start the action. So for the first step, I have created a Python project in my PyCharm IDE and I've added certain libraries into my project structure. These libraries are Llama Index, SQL Alchemy, and MySQL Connector Python. So once you have done it, the next step is to import the necessary libraries that we are going to use. So firstly, from the Llama Index, I am going to import the SQL database. And then from the Llama Index Struct Store, I am going to import the NL-SQL Table Query Engine and SQL Table Retrieval Query Engine. I am importing these two libraries because these two are the fundamental Llama Index data structure. And since there are several methods available to establish a connection between an LLM and databases, so in this narrative, I am employing a SQL database in conjunction with the two fundamental Llama Index data structures. This one is used for running a simple query to retrieve certain rows and this one is used to retrieve the entire table from our database. And then from the SQL Alchemy, I am going to import the create engine because we are gonna need engines to connect our database with ChatGPT. And also I'm using the MySQL connector because I want to create a connection of MySQL database with ChatGPT. SQL Alchemy is a powerful Python library that serves as a bridge between programming languages and relational databases, and this is why I am using SQL Alchemy here. Once you have imported the libraries, the next step is to create the SQL Alchemy engine and the metadata. And for that, you have to create a new variable by the name engine, in which I am going to use the create engine function, inside which you have to firstly use the database name with which you want to establish the connection, which in my case is MySQL, so I've added MySQL in it. Then after the plus sign, you have to define the connector with which you are connecting the database. Since I've added the MySQL connector, so I'm passing MySQL connector here. And after that, you have to place a colon and double forward slash and you have to provide the username for your MySQL server, which in my case is root, and after colon you have to provide the password, which in my case is null, so I've left it empty. Then after @ you have to provide the paths to your localhost, which is localhost colon your port name. And after the forward slash, you have to provide the database name which you want to create on the MySQL server. So I want my database name to be SQL Alchemy, so I have provided it. You can give any name here. And then I am creating a simple metadata object which I am going to use later on in this video. Now let's move towards the next step, which is to create the table, and for that we are going to use some more features of SQL Alchemy. So I am going to import all of these as well. So I'm going to say from SQL Alchemy import table, column, string, numeric, date, foreign key. These are all the fields which will be used while creating the table for the SQL Alchemy. Alright, now once you have added the required libraries, the next step is to actually create the table, and you can do it by firstly defining the table name in a new variable. So my table name is going to be car brands. And then I'm going to create a new variable where I'm going to use this table from SQL Alchemy, in which I'm going to pass the table name, the metadata object which I've created previously, and then you have to define the whole description of the columns of the table. So there are two columns inside my car brands table. The first one is brand having string data type and it is the primary key. Then the next column is for the country. It is also of the string type and the null value is set to be false. And then similarly, I am going to create another table which is going to be car models, and the variable name is gonna be car models table. Then once again I am going to use the table field of the SQL Alchemy, inside which I am going to pass the table name which is cars model, the metadata object, and the two columns which are going to be present inside the table. The first column is model, which is of the string type and is a primary key. Then the next column is brand, which is of the string type and it is actually a foreign key from the cars underscore brands table brand value. So this brand value is actually a foreign key for this brand value from the car brands table. Once this is done, now go ahead and quickly run this to see if it is running successfully or not. Okay, so the process finished with exit code 0. This means that up till now everything is working fine. And in this way, you can create multiple tables one after the other, and you are going to store all of those in the metadata object. And once you have stored all the tables inside the metadata object, now we are going to create all of these at once by passing them into the engine. And for that, you can use metadata object dot create all, and inside the create all function, you can pass the engine. And this engine actually has the information about our connection to the database. So once you run it, it is going to go inside the connection string which we have passed inside the engine, and is going to create all the tables which are present inside a metadata object. Now let's go ahead and run this. Process finished with exit code 0. This means that the tables were successfully created. Now, in order to verify this, I have connected the local host to my MySQL workbench, and these are all the databases which are currently available. So you can see that my SQL Alchemy database has been created, but right now it does not show any table inside it. So let's refresh it to view the tables, and you can see that now there are two tables inside it, which are the car brands and car models, and these are the two tables that we just created from our PyCharm IDE. Alright, so this means that up till now everything is working fine. Now let's move towards the next step, which is to actually insert the data inside the tables. And for that, you have to import the insert from the SQL Alchemy, because we are going to use insert function. And after that, I have created a new list, or you can also say a dictionary by the name rows, inside which I have different key value pairs. For the first row, the key is brand, which is actually my column name for the table, and this is its value. And the next column was country, and this is the value. Similarly, I have created 5 different rows inside my rows dictionary, and this is the data which is going to be inserted inside my car brands table. And for that, we will firstly have to convert each of these rows into the statement, and then execute the statement using the engine. And to do so, we are going to use a for loop. So firstly, I am going to iterate through the dictionary of rows. And as I have said earlier, that I am going to insert values inside the car brands table by iterating through the row. And once they are being inserted, I am converting it into a statement. And then finally, I am going to use the connect function of the engine and storing it as connection. Then I am using this connection to execute the statement. So in each iteration, a single row from this dictionary of rows will be converted to statement, and then that statement will be executed using the connection, and then the connection will be committed. And in this way, all the rows which are present inside this dictionary will be inserted into the database. Let's go ahead and run this to see if the data is actually inserted in the table or not. Alright, so the process finished with exit code 0. This means that data has been successfully inserted. Now let's head back to your MySQL workbench. I am going to refresh it again, and in a new SQL tab, I am going to write the queries. Firstly, I am going to use the SQL Alchemy, which is the database name, and then I am going to write a select query to select all the rows from the car brands table. So now let's go ahead and run it, and you can see 5 rows have been successfully inserted inside our car brands table. Cool. Now let's head back to our PyCharm IDE, and just like we inserted the data inside our car brands table, similarly we are also going to insert the data inside our cars model table. For that, I am going to use this code. Firstly, I have created another dictionary by the name rows, in which I have added these rows having the values for the 2 columns of the table, which are model and brand. And then, just like I did previously, again I am iterating through this dictionary, and for each row present inside the dictionary, I am converting its value into a statement, and then I am executing the statement using the connection, and I am committing the connection. So in this way, all these rows will be inserted inside our table, which is the cars model. I have executed the code, and it once again finished with exit code 0. Now if I go ahead and run the same command on the car models table and run it, you are going to see that now all the rows have been successfully inserted inside our car models table as well. Okay, so up till now, we have successfully imported our libraries. We have established a connection with our MySQL database. We have created the tables and we have inserted the rows into the table using the SQL Alchemy library. Now the next step is to actually connect this MySQL database with the ChatGPT so that we can easily prompt it like we do in ChatGPT. And for that, firstly I am going to connect the Llama index to the MySQL engine by naming the table. And this can be done by using this command. So I am using the SQL database which I imported from the Llama index, and inside it I am passing the engine which is from the SQL Alchemy, and I have to include the tables which should be connected to the ChatGPT. So here inside the include tables array, I am passing the table names one after the other. And I am storing all of this information inside a variable called SQL database. After that, you have to create a structured store to offer a context to ChatGPT, and this can be done by using the two fundamental Llama index data structure for executing the queries. So this can be done by using this command, which is NL SQL Table Query Engine, which is actually the natural language SQL Table Query Engine, inside which I am going to pass this database and I am going to store it in a variable called the query engine. So from here I have connected my MySQL engine with the Llama index by using the SQL database, and I have also provided a structured store to offer a context to GPT by using the natural language SQL Table Query Engine, inside which I have passed the actual context and the information about my data tables. Now the next step is to connect all of this with our OpenAI, inside which our ChatGPT is present, and this can be done by using the OpenAI API key. And you have to do it in two steps. Firstly, you have to set the environment variable for the OpenAI API key, and you also have to set the API key for the OpenAI library. And to do so, you have to go to your OpenAI account, and once you have successfully logged in, you have to click on this log sign that says API keys. Once you click on API keys, either you can select any previously created API key, or you can click on this create new secret key from here and copy the value and save it somewhere else because we are going to use it. And remember to not share it with anyone because you don't want anyone else to have access to your API key. Once you have do that, now go back to your PyCharm IDE, and here I am going to firstly import the OS in order to set the environment variable for the OpenAI key, because the environment variables are placed inside the OS. So I've set the os.environment OpenAI API key, and I've placed my API key value here. So this is the first step of establishing the connection with ChatGPT, which is to set the environment variable. The next step is to set the API key for the OpenAI library. And to do so, I am going to import OpenAI because inside it we have the API key, and then I am using the OpenAI.API key and I am assigning it the value of my secret API key that I have just generated. So once this is done, our connection with the ChatGPT has been successfully established, but make sure that you comment the rows where you are inserting the data inside your database, because if you do not insert it, then it is going to show you an error that the data already exists, because we have set a single column for both of the tables to be the primary key. Alright, so I have commented the code. Now let's go ahead and quickly run this to see if it successfully executes or not. Alright, so the process finished with exit code 0, but it may cause some error if you are configuring the environment variable after connecting to the Llama index. So I've placed this code above this, and then I've made a connection of the Llama index to the MySQL server. Now everything is fine. The only thing that we need to do is to actually prompt our database to get the results from the table. So let's do this. I am going to use the query engine, inside which I have placed the natural language SQL table query engine, and I am going to use the query function of the query engine, inside which you have to pass your query or the prompt which you want to get answered. So I have prompted it which car brands are from the France. And here in this prompt, I have not explained that this data is present in which table of the database, but I have simply asked it to give me the car brands which are from the France, and I have stored the result inside a variable called response. Then I am going to convert this response into a string and I am simply printing it. Now let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so you can see that it has given us the response that the car brands from France are Citroën and Renault. And you can see that we did not provided any context that you have to get the data from which table of the database, but it somehow figured it on its own that this data is present in which table and gave us an output. So this was the query from our car brands table. Let's make a query for the car's model table. And to do so, once again, I am going to use the query engine and I am going to call its query function, inside which I am going to pass the query, which is which car models are from the Hyundai. And once again, I'm storing it in a new variable called response and I'm converting the response to string and printing the response. Now let's go ahead and run this. And you can see that it has given us the response for our first prompt, which was the cars from France are Citroën and Renault, and it has also provided us the output for our second query, and it says that the car models from Hyundai include Creta, HP20, Santa Fe and Tucson. So that's a really cool thing that it figured out that which query goes to which table and it actually went to that table and fetched the response for us. But these are the simple queries. What if we want to get results which is from both of the tables? Let's say we want to get the result which is formed by joining the two tables together. Then let's see how ChatGPT responds to it. And to check it, I am going to write this query which says which car models are produced in France. So if you remember that the car brands table and cars model table have different data. So if you scroll up where we were inserting the data, you can see that inside our cars brand table, we have the brand and the country. So the car brands table contains the information that which brands are present in which country, and the cars model table contains the model and the brand. So actually the current query needs to join the two tables to get the data of the brand and the country from both the tables. So this time I am asking is that which car models are produced in France, so it needs to join the two tables together. Let's see how it responds to it. Let's run it. This is the response of our first query that the brand from France are these two. Then this is the response of our second query that the car model from Honda include these cars. And this is the response of our third query which says the car models produced in France include the C3, C4, Capture, Duster and Sandero. So you can see that ChatGPT successfully performed a join operation on our two tables, and firstly it figured out that it needs to perform a join table to answer this query. It performed a join operation between the two tables and then it fetched the correct record from joining of the two tables. So that's a really cool thing. In this way, you can use ChatGPT to get the results from your database without actually running any complicated queries. So these were all the queries that we were writing in order to fetch the data from the database. So let's try if we can actually insert the data inside our database from ChatGPT or not. And for that, I am going to once again use the query function of the query engine, inside which I am saying that insert a new row in the car brands table having brand Toyota and country USA, and I am again printing the response. Let's go ahead and run this and see how it responds to our query and see if it actually inserts the data into the table or not. This is the response of our first query where the brand from France are these two. This is the response of our second query. This is the response of our third query. And this is the response of our fourth query which says a new row has been successfully inserted into the car brands table. The brand is Toyota and the country is USA. Now let's go ahead and jump to our MySQL workbench to verify this insertion. So here I am inside my MySQL workbench. Here inside the select query, I am going to replace the car models by car brands table because we have inserted the new row inside the car brands table. Now let's go ahead and run this. And you can see that a new row whose brand name is Toyota and the country is USA has been successfully inserted inside our car brands table. So this means that ChatGPT can not only retrieve the data from our database, but it can also actually insert the rows inside our database if we correctly prompt it. Up till now, we can see that ChatGPT is able to execute the queries in which it has to fetch the data, and it can also insert a new row inside the table as well, along with performing join operations on the table. So now what if I want to store the result of this query inside a new table, and that table too will be created by ChatGPT itself. Let's see how ChatGPT responds to it and whether it will create a new table or not. And to do so, I am going to prompt it that which car models are produced in France, and this query is the same as this one, but in addition to it, I'm gonna say, can you create a new table whose name is gonna be brand models and store the result in it. Then I'm simply printing the response, and let's see how ChatGPT responds to it. Alright, so you can see that these four are the responses of our first four queries. Here it is showing error because we have already added a row by the same value, so it says that there is already a row in it. And this is the response of our last query, where we are storing the result of our join operation inside a new table. So it says that brand model table has been successfully created, and it contains the car models that are produced in France, which is actually the result of this query. So these 5 cars should be present inside our new table, which is brand model. Let's head to our MySQL workbench, and from here I am going to refresh it, and you can see that now we have a new table by the name brand models. So now I'm gonna quickly go ahead and query the brands model table to select all the rows which are present inside it. Let's run it, and you can see that there are 5 rows inside this table, which are C3, C4, captured, duster and send row, and these are all the rows that were fetched as a result of joining the two tables together in order to get the car models which are produced in France. So you can see that in addition to fetching the data and inserting the data inside the table, ChatGPT is also able to create new tables and storing the result of different queries in that table as well. So that's a really cool thing, that all of this can be done without actually executing the query. But whenever the response is generated, ChatGPT is actually running a SQL query on our database, and hence it generates the response for us. So in any case, you want to get the query, let's say you don't know how to write the query but you know how to fetch the data, so you are going to prompt ChatGPT, and then from the response you can get the query that how it fetched the result for us. And to do so, you simply have to use the metadata. If you remember that I told you in the beginning that we are going to use metadata in this video. So if I want to get the query of this response, so I am simply going to copy it, and in the next line I am going to paste it, and from here instead of simply response I am going to say response.metadata. Okay, and you can do so for any of the response whose query you want to see. So let's say I want to view the query of this response as well, so I have done the same here. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay, so you can see that the response has been generated, and this was our third prompt. And here you can see that when we printed the metadata, in the metadata it has also provided us the SQL query. So the SQL query that ChatGPT ran on our database on the backend is select model from car models where the brand in, and then there is a nested query that says select brand from car brands where the country is France. Okay, so this was a query of our third prompt, and the last one where we were actually asking it to store the data inside a new table. So here is the query for it. Let's see the query. It says create table brand models as select model from car models where brand in, select brand from car brands where the country in France. So it has created a new table brands model, and the data is present inside these nested queries, which is now present inside the table. So that's really cool thing, that it can also provide us SQL queries which different people can use for different purposes. So in this way, we have bridged the gap between artificial intelligence and relational databases. Now it's your turn to take these concepts and build something amazing. Remember, the key to mastering any technology is practice. So don't hesitate to experiment with your newfound knowledge. Thank you.